The IELTS speaking exam lasts for around 15 minutes and is broken down into 3 parts. Part 1, Part 2 and Part 3. And in this video, we will look at each part of the speaking exam and we will see what we can do to help us get a high score. So let's begin. So the test begins with part 1, and part 1 of the speaking exam lasts anywhere between 4 and 5 minutes. Now you want to look at this part of the speaking exam like a warm-up. So you know when you go to the gym and you stretch your body, you stretch your muscles before you start your intensive workout? Well, that's what part 1 of the speaking exam is like. It's as if you are preparing for the more difficult parts of the exam. So the questions are usually a lot easier in this part of the exam compared to the rest of the exam, and questions from part 1 of the exam are usually about things that you are familiar with. For example, you might be asked questions such as how many brothers and sisters do you have, or questions about your favorite hobbies, or what you like to do in your free time. And a key point actually for part 1 of the speaking exam is to try and be as comfortable as possible. So try to remain relaxed and try to take advantage of being asked easier questions. So you want to answer questions as naturally as possible. And a good way to prepare for this is write a list of questions that you might be asked for part 1 of the speaking exam and record yourself answering these questions. And when you are recording yourself, try to imagine that the examiner is in front of you. And then once you finished your recording, just go back and look at the recording and just see how natural or how comfortable you looked, okay? And the more we practice, the better we will get at this, the more relaxed we will feel as well. And that's the main focus here, to be relaxed and comfortable and just try to speak naturally. And now let's talk about part 2 of the speaking exam, which is where you will talk about a specific topic. And this part of the exam will last for around 2 minutes. And the main focus of this part of the exam is to see if you can continuously talk about a specific topic without stopping. So the way this will work is that the person taking the test will be given a random card, and on this card will be questions about a specific topic. Now this topic is very random. You won't know what this topic will be up until you will be given this card. An example of a topic that you might have to speak about might be something like a family member that has impacted your life, or a favorite picture at home, or even something such as a healthy habit that you enjoy doing. So let's look at an example card just to see what it looks like and what else is on this card. So on your screen you can see a typical example of what a card might look like. So let's go through this together. So it says, describe a book you have read. So that's the topic of this card, okay? A book that you have read. And on the card it also says, you should say what kind of book it is, what it is about, and what sort of people would enjoy it. And finally, explain why you like it, okay? So what happens in the exam is that once the examiner gives you this card, the examiner will then say to you, you have 60 seconds to make notes before you start speaking. And once you start speaking, you will be expected to speak for up to 2 minutes without stopping. Now the difficult thing about part 2 is, what do you even say in those 2 minutes? What happens if you run out of time? What do you do in those 60 seconds? So let's go through this together. Well, there are 2 very good techniques that you can use that can help you perform at a very high level. So let's start with the first option, which is where you will just answer the questions that are given to you on the card. So in your 60 seconds, first of all, what you would do is just try to write down the answers of each question, okay? And then once your 60 seconds are over, then you will just use what you have written down and speak about it for up to 2 minutes. But here is the problem. 60 seconds is not a lot of time, and especially when you're writing, okay? So the first thing that we need to do is when we are writing out our answers to each question, we just want to write out in notes. That means we are not trying to write in full sentences. We're just trying to write down the important points, okay? We want to write down as less as possible because again, 60 seconds is not a lot of time and it will go past really quickly. So answer each question with as less words as possible, and then once your 60 seconds are over, then you can look at those answers and talk about them in a bit more detail when your 2 minutes start. So that's option one, where we use the questions that have been given to us and we write down answers in as less words as possible. Then you would just use those answers to speak. But the second option, and this option is a lot better in my opinion than the first one, and that is to use the 5W technique. Now this is a technique that I often talk about, but if you're new here or if you've forgotten, let's talk about this in a bit more detail. So the 5W technique, you can use this for almost any topic, by the way, and it stands for who, what, where, when, and why. So those are your 5 W's. And the way we use the 5W technique is we look at what the topic on the card is about. So in this case, let's look at it again. The topic was about books. So with the 5W technique, you can ignore the rest of the card. You can ignore all the bullet points and we will replace those questions. We will replace those bullet points with the 5 W's. So the 5 W's again that we will answer are who, what, where, when, and why. And for each question, we can finish off and create our own questions. So for example, who could be who told you about this book, or who is the author of the book. What could be what is the book about, or what is the book called. Where could be where you bought the book from, or if the book is about a story, then you can say where is the book located, where is the setting of the book. And when could be when you bought it or when the book was written, and why could be why is this your favorite book. So as you can see there, all I've done is I've created my own questions, and all I will do now is just answer the questions, and again we just want to write down the answers in as less words as possible. So who, write down one answer, okay? For example, if the author is Adam Smith, then I will just write the answer author Adam Smith. What, I would just possibly just write a couple of bullet points of what the book is about, and you get the idea of what you would do for the rest of the questions. And the benefit of using the 5W technique is that it gives you a lot more things to talk about. And also, I think I mentioned this, I'm not entirely sure, but the 5 W's, you can mix them around, okay? So we don't have to have them in this order: who, what, where, when, and why. We can have what, for example, first, and then you can talk about who, and then you can talk about why. So put the questions in any order that you feel comfortable with, and make sure that you practice this technique before your exam. Don't just try to go into the exam and then use the 5W technique for the first time. It is very important to practice this before, okay? The more you practice, the better you will get at it, okay? Now, one final point with part 2 of the speaking exam. And this question, you might have even asked yourself, what happens if you run out of things to say and there's still a lot of time left on the clock for your 2 minutes to finish? Well, if you use the 5W technique, what you can do is just repeat the process. So for example, you're speaking, you've answered the 5 W's, and then you can just start again and do the 5W technique again. So for instance, let's look at our question again. And the question is about books, okay? So I've told you about this one book and I've talked about the 5 W's. So let's look at our card again, and let's say that we've talked about our 5 W's. So we have talked about who the author is, what the book is about, where the book is set, when the book was written, and why this is my favorite book. So we've answered those questions in a bit of detail, but we still have 1 minute on the clock left. Then what I would do is just repeat the process again, but this time talk about a different book, okay? So you could say, and another book that I really like is, and then go through the same 5 W's again. So as you can see, this is why we need to practice beforehand. The more we practice with this, the better we will get. So make sure you try this technique out and let me know how you find it. And now let's move on to part 3 of the speaking exam, and this part is called the general discussion. Now part 3 of the exam is connected to part 2. So in part 2, as we discussed, that you will talk about a specific topic and it will just be you talking. The examiner will just wait there up until your time has finished, and once your time has finished in part 2, then in part 3 you will have a general conversation about the same topic that you were asked about in part 2. So for example, if in part 2 of the exam your topic was, we'll talk about a different topic this time, we won't use books. Say your topic was about holidays, okay? Your favorite holidays. Then you might be asked questions such as the ones on your screen. So where do people in your country like to travel to? How important is it for families to go on holiday together? Why do some people go on holiday alone? And there's 2 extra questions there. We won't talk about those in too much detail, but these are just some examples of the types of questions that can be asked in part 3 of the exam. So again, if my topic was holidays, then I might be asked these questions. If my topic was books, then the questions in part 3 will also be about books. And the questions are usually quite general. They're not specifically about you, okay? They're quite general. And in this part of the exam, again, just like part 1, it lasts between 4 and 5 minutes. And what we want to do here is give extended answers. So you don't just want to give 1 sentence answers. You want to add on a bit of information. Give a little bit of detail to your answers. And how can we do that? Well, we talked about the 5W technique, but that's mainly for part 2. And in part 3, we can use this 4-step method, which is actually on the IDP website. So this 4-step method is as follows. So first, you would just give a direct answer to the question. So that means you just answer the question in 1 sentence. And by the way, I will show you a demonstration of what this answer looks like, but let's go back to this and see what the steps are. So we give a direct answer to the question. We explain with some reasons, then we provide an example to support your answer, and finally you give an alternative or a consequence, which is basically the opposite side of the argument, okay? So let's look at what a good answer actually looks like. So we'll use this question on your screen as our example question, which is, why do some people go on holiday alone? And here is our answer. Well, I think there's many reasons why people go on holiday alone. One of the main reasons is that people don't need to compromise when they're on their own. For example, if you go on holiday on your own, you pick your own destination, you pick your own hotel, and you can do the activities that you want to do without compromising. However, traveling alone is not for everyone. I know people that can get bored of traveling alone because they won't have anyone to talk to. So that is our answer, and as you can see, by using the 4-step method, it really helps us give a detailed answer, and that's what we're looking for in part 3. Now, you don't want to follow this technique for every question that you will get asked in part 3, but it is a good technique to use every now and then. Another thing that you can do is you can mix and match different parts of this 4-step method. So you don't need to use all 4 steps. You can just use step 1 and step 3, for example, or step 1, step 2, and step 3. Okay, so you can mix and match. So let's see what that would look like. So again, we'll use the same question. Why do some people go on holiday alone? Well, I think there's many reasons why people go on holiday alone. And one of the main reasons is that people don't need to compromise when they're on their own. And that's my answer there. So as you can see, I only used 2 steps for this. So to summarize part 3, it's a 4-step method. Learn each step and we can mix and match the steps. And if you want to learn more about part 3 of the speaking exam, you can click on this video on your screen and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.